Stormy day in New York City. We see a grandmother knitting a sweater while watching TV. Suddenly, she hears something rustling on the ceiling of her room, which makes her very nervous. She opens the telephone directory and calls the exterminator to tell him an animal is rustling on her roof. Frank asks Grandma for her name and home address, and she reads it off the wall under her breath. After some time, Frank arrives, and seeing the other exterminator's car, he gets angry and goes to the apartment house. Outside the apartment, Frank sees saliva on the duct and sniffs it, which is very smelly. Grandma opens the door and Frank objects to Grandma calling the Bug Brothers, saying they are criminals and will steal all your stuff. Frank tells her they didn't even clean your ducts off properly, but Grandma forgets why Frank comes here. Frank tells her you called me a while ago about the noises in your walls, and then she calls him inside. Frank sees blood on the floor and hears the disturbing noises. He sees a wounded man inside the ducts and screams. Then something also injures him and drags him into the duct, and Grandma only sees everything in fear. The grandmother starts knitting a sweater again, and after a while, she hears the sound of the animal and calls someone else again. 4 days earlier, a meteor fell from space to the Earth and landed inside a house. Meteor was an egg, and a spider came from the egg that crawled and sat on the baby's cradle. A 12-year-old girl named Charlotte comes out from the duct and notices the windshield is broken, but she captures a doll's photo and posts it on social media saying, "My next victim." She sees a little spider on her hand and hears the voice of a woman. She quickly keeps the spider inside the matchbox and goes back inside the ducts. The woman named Gunter comes inside to check, and after seeing the broken windshield she runs out in anger. Charlotte runs through the ducts, and first, she watches her grandma. After moving ahead she watches Eric. Moving on, Charlotte sees Gunter complaining to her stepfather that your daughter always teases me. Ethan apologizes, but Gunter asks him to fix her window and leaves. Charlotte rushes to her room, empties her coins jar and puts the spider in it. Ethan comes to her and asks, "Did you broke Gunter's windshield and stole her doll?" Charlotte tells him that I don't play with dolls. Ethan asks her to stay away from Gunter and leaves. Ethan is a plumber and sketches comic books, and while he is talking on the phone, Sandy tells him your last published book will be one of the bigger releases for the summer. Charlotte posted her spider picture and gave it the name Sting. Charlotte's mother Heather asks her to watch her brother while she is going to finish her job and will come back in 20 minutes. While Charlotte is looking at her drawings, she sees a cockroach and Sting whistles in hunger to see it. Charlotte throws the cockroach inside the jar and the spider kills it with immense speed. Charlotte wanders after seeing the dead cockroach, but she doesn't know what type of spider it is. While Ethan is fixing the pipe, a cockroach falls on his face and he screams. Maria the house owner comes and Ethan tells her your work is complete and leaves. Charlotte catches another insect and she whistles to check if the spider is hungry or not. Spider whistles back and she puts the insect inside the jar, then she sees the spider kill the insect with immense speed. Ethan returns home after finishing his job and Heather asks him to hold the baby and goes to her mother's apartment. Her mother and Aunt Gunter watching the TV show, but she asks her to sleep. Ethan breaks his pencil while sketching and calls Charlotte for a sharpener, and when Charlotte arrives, he tells her that the publisher has decided to print 40,000 copies of He comic book. Charlotte actually writes comic books and Ethan sketches the characters in the book. While Ethan is showing Charlotte his sketches, Heather comes there and becomes happy to see them. Charlotte tells Ethan that your professor's character is like my father, and my father isn't bad, and she makes eyes at him. Heather asks them for dinner and sends Charlotte to set the table, and she thanks Ethan for loving Charlotte. After dinner, Ethan removes his eyes from the sketch and then goes to Charlotte's room where he sees her spider drawing. Charlotte comes inside and Ethan tells her your sketching is good, but Charlotte asks him, did you remove those eyes from the character? Ethan says sorry to her and tells her it looks cooler the way it was, and Charlotte asks him not to pretend if he doesn't like her ideas. Spider opens the jar and goes through the ducts to Gunter's room, where Gunter's parrot starts squawking to see it. At breakfast, no one listens to Charlotte and she storms off, to which Ethan says maybe she's mad at me because of yesterday's sketch. Heather tells Ethan she dresses like you and she also does sketching with you. Gunter squeals as she sees her parrot, whose skin has been completely ripped apart by the spider. She asks Ethan to call Frank. Frank arrives and is shocked and tells them something rips the parrot inside. Frank sees the blood drops on the duct and throws smoking bombs inside it to clean all the ducts. Charlotte hears the spiders growling and finds out it is a mimic. She then catches several insects to feed it. A mothball drops near the spider's jar, which makes it uncomfortable. She puts the mothballs on the spider's web, causing it to burn, and the spider throws the jar down in agony, but Charlotte saves it. She then sees the spider, which is now becoming more bigger and powerful. Frank comes inside Charlotte's room to clean the duct, but she asks him not to clean. Frank asks her why and she tells him her spider pet doesn't like this spray. Frank fears to see the spider and Charlotte tells him Sting doesn't like you. At night, The spider goes out to hunt and Maria's dog starts breaking after seeing it and she kicks the dog out. She takes out her family picture. The spider attacks her and she falls to the ground. Her head begins to bleed, she feels her body shaking and her mouth develops a rash due to the spider's venom. After that, she vomits blood and falls, and the spider enters her mouth and starts eating her body from inside. Charlotte goes to Eric to buy his tank for her spider. Eric calls her inside and asks what kind of spider you have. Charlotte tells him I haven't found it yet. Charlotte asks him how much time the spider takes to grow and Eric tells her some take months and some take years. Eric is shocked after seeing the spider and asks her to leave the spider here, and after he runs tests on it he will return her with a fish box. While Ethan and Heather are talking they hear a strange noise from the duct. Ethan opens the duct mesh to see and falls, but it's Maria's dog. Ethan goes to return her dog, but after knocking too long he unlocks the door and leaves the dog. The dog continues barking, and when Ethan goes inside he sees Maria's dead body whose condition is very fealty. Eric calls Ethan and tells her your daughter is keeping a venomous spider. Eric shows him the spider which is now growing bigger. Ethan angrily goes back and asks Charlotte about the spider. Ethan tells her Eric is going to take it to the health center. Charlotte gets very angry hearing this and tells Ethan that you are ruining everything and you can never be like my father. Ethan tells her that your father who never came to see who you lives in the same city, not in Italy. Charlotte goes to her room crying after hearing this. Eric, on the other hand, becomes obsessed with the spider and feeds it mice to make it grow faster. Charlotte reads the comic book and then throws it outside and the spider grows much bigger and breaks the fish tank. While Ethan is fixing the boiler, he gets a call from his office and a woman tells him due to the pending work they can't run it anymore. Ethan becomes angry and starts hitting the boiler. Gunter sees him and kicks him out of the job. Heavily drunk Gunter hears her cat meowing and goes to find her inside the duct. Her flashlight goes off and the spider attacks her and takes her inside the duct. Distraught, Ethan tears up a sketch of the spider and throws it away, while the spider traps Gunter in its web. Ethan is fixing the TV but he gets an electric shock and breaks the TV. Heather asks Charlotte to another room. While they are talking Heather screams after seeing the spider and the spider first attacks Ethan and then Heather. Unaware, Charlotte is listening to songs with headphones, due to which she cannot even hear their voices. The dog starts barking and Charlotte goes to bring food for the dog but yet she doesn't see Ethan and the spider drags him away. The dog continues barking and this time she goes and sees the duct mesh is open and the spider is dragging Ethan. Charlotte fears and goes to open the windows but fails, and the spider traps Ethan in its web, and Ethan screams. Charlotte comes back to the duct and hears the dog barking, and when she calls the dog the spider whistles. Spider runs toward her but she puts a table in front of the duct, which prevents the spider from coming out, but Charlotte gets scared and starts screaming. The spider comes out from another duct and takes her little brother. She calls Sting, the spider, to give him but it's too late for her. Charlotte then makes the powder of mothballs and after mixing it in the water fills inside the toy gun. She sprays it on the walls to move ahead and sees the dog's body, while Ethan and Gunter try to talk but the spider comes and takes Gunter away. Charlotte goes to Eric's apartment and finds him trapped in a spider's web, and then she goes to her grandma's apartment. She asks her grandma about the spider but the grandma tells a large animal attempts to attack her but runs away. Charlotte sniffs her sweater and asks her not to remove it, then she finds more mothballs and blends them to make more spray. Charlotte wets herself with the spray to prevent the spider from attacking her. Ethan burns his hand when he grabs the spider's web, and Charlotte finds him because of his screaming. She gets inside the duct and sprays the mixture on spider's web to free Ethan, and here we see Frank come, which we already saw. After releasing Ethan from the web, Charlotte asks him to make it to trapdoor. Ethan hears the baby's voice but Charlotte stops him. The spider comes and they fall to the ground. When the spider is just about to kill Charlotte, Ethan drops mothball water on it which burns it and the spider runs away. Ethan asks Charlotte to stay and suddenly Frank falls and goes to get the grandma out of the apartment. They have only one bottle left and all doors have been locked. As the spider comes out, Frank shoots and the water pipe leaks. Charlotte tells them that the water is not good and then the spider attacks Frank and kills him. Ethan and Charlotte go inside the garbage compactor where they find Heather and the baby. They spray the water on the web and free them both. The spider comes inside and Ethan presses the button. The machine switch is plugged off. Ethan tries to plug in the switch while Charlotte stops the spider from coming in. As Ethan plugs the switch, he becomes unconscious. Charlotte presses the button and the blender falls on the spider which kills it. Ethan regains consciousness and the family reunites and leaves. Then we see a lot of spider eggs and the world is not ready to face this apocalyptic storm. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to watch more videos like this.